And it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out, and enjoy the show. And I recognize this desperate behavior because we're seeing exactly the same thing in the ongoing dispute between the Bears. Their lawyers are doing all sorts of crazy stuff. They're rushing to the state courts, begging the judge to stop. And so, when you look at what's happening, it's very obvious what's happening, and it's an act. In this case, it's an act of desperation because they're getting crushed. And it's really interesting to see the lengths that people will go, the things that they'll do and say, the cards that they'll play when they are in the process of getting boxed in. So anyhow, like I said, read the Neon Revolt article. It's a very interesting story, and it's a very interesting prediction. And the thing is that what all of this desperation means is that the good guys are winning. So, is there anything that you've learned from the Big Bear? Yeah. You can't expect someone to transform into something that they're not and have never been. We have a civil, or I guess I'd say hostile but civil relationship at this point in time. He's probably a secret homosexual. Yes, I agree. I understand that just because somebody is married to a woman does not dictate his behavior. We're not all God's children. A lot of us are the devil's children. And everyone is fallen, everyone is fallen, everyone has sinned, and has fallen short of the glory of God. So we're not all God's children, and that whole concept is entirely extra biblical and practically anti-Christian. I mean, this is practically unheard of. And of course, the narrative is supposed to be, this is practically unheard of. And don't forget, if you subscribe to Unauthorized, you also get a subscription to Social Galactic. We live in a victim world. This is a standard practice. There's that saying that the Jew cries out as he strikes you. Well, in this case, it's there's low IQ and criminals who are hopped up on chemicals. Things are going to happen, and so probably the best way that you can do it is to subscribe to Unauthorized. And I would encourage you to subscribe to Unauthorized in any event, because it is already good, and it is going to be getting better regularly, and it's going to be great. So, now keep in mind, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not up on the the various case law, written law, etc., etc. But the lawyers that I know are very, very, very good lawyers. We're not talking about a little panty waist boutique pit bulls out of Oakland, which is what they went with. One of my best friends is former head of legal at a $2 billion company. He has no self-restraint, and is just a a liar that is so shameless, it borders on the pathological. And it gets better. And this is the big thing. And this is the one that's going to be fun, Patreon. Colin, Tyler, I hope you're watching this, because we're now letting the whole world know that this was an attempt at extortion. Here's the exact sequence of events. Patreon deplatforms Owen. Owen talks to them. They've attempted to dox and make life difficult for the 72 bears that are currently the subject of the lawsuit filed by Patreon. All their account information was sent to a third party. Naughty, naughty. How much they gave, their emails, their real names, who they were donating to, and how long. And so, anyhow, so to go on, I'm not a lawyer. Unfortunately, the California Data Privacy Act specifically excludes legal claims from this. However, it's a pretty unethical thing to do, especially in light of the fact that their case is just absolutely ridiculous, if not retarded. So what Patreon did is they engaged in a very deceptive practice. And, if they weren't so retarded, they would have, simply accepted the reality of the situation from the beginning, because the whole situation was mathematically certain. I'm not lying about any of this. I'm not even telling you half the stuff that I've heard from the lawyers. But, everything that I'm telling you now is absolutely 100% documented truth. Except for obviously the predictions. That we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully those are 100% accurate too. But from the very beginning, they're not smart enough to understand that if 100 people can show up, then it's just as easy for 500 people to show up, or 1,000. Or if you make a really bad blunder on the defense, maybe you'll create the possibility for group actions. And so, I'm not going to go into any further detail about what the lawyers are planning, but I can assure you that I haven't even addressed half of it. We can push anyone around. We're a big company, not that big, but relative to the individual consumer, sure. We have the ability to hire lawyers. We have our in-house legal counsel. Take a step back from your hatred for Owen and your hatred for me. Just put it on pause for a second. The Bears are going to win. That's why Owen is going to win. Technically, I have no dog in this hunt. I have no account on. I don't have I don't even have a user account on Patreon. I'm not a creator. I'm not a patron. You were right, and Owen and the Bears. Let's say your legal analysis was correct. Your uninformed legal analysis was correct, and Patreon won. If Patreon were to win, it's not good for Big Bear. It wouldn't be good for me if I ever got involved with companies like that. I don't. You'll notice I don't have a Patreon account. even the worst people can be used for good causes. You know, I mean, it's kind of funny, being tangentially, I mean, I'm not really involved, but I mean, I am now saying that there is a better than 30% chance that, despite the fact that, this should be a simple business that's plenty profitable, there's a very good chance that just because they have handled the situation with such a complete lack of foresight and a complete failure to understand who and what they were dealing with, that it's now at the stage of an existential crisis, because it's not about us. I mean, obviously Owen and the Bears and that sort of thing make things difficult. He uses bad and broken tools for great purposes. And so it should be at least possible for you to consider and contemplate the possibility that what Owen and the Bears are doing is actually a good thing that is in your interest, even though you don't like them, even though you're not a big fan of them. Even if you are, actually, especially if you are the wicked, you have to obey the beast. And so they're not. And so when you look at this, when you see all of this happening, then you can see why they are so panicked about this. Technically, I have no dog in this hunt. I have no account on. I don't have I don't even have a user account on Patreon. I'm not a creator. I'm not a patron. There you're dealing with structural flaws in the organization itself. Like, for example, the comedian there's a Jewish comedian who is currently the president of as far as the Bears go, there's a reason, some of you might wonder, well, why did they sue 72 of the Bears when there's like 100 arbitrations? Well, it's not like they told us, but our understanding, or the understanding that the lawyers have reached and shared with me, is that it looks like they are basing their case on the idea that these are people who logged onto Patreon after the change on December 19th, because it's not about us. Obviously Owen and the Bears and that sort of thing make things difficult. So on that note, have a good evening. I'll look forward to seeing you at the next Dark Stream.